everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we look at every single Best Picture winner, including now, for the last couple years, every single Best Picture nominee. And as it is that time of year again, we today are looking at All Quiet on the Western Front from 2022. We have already seen this film from 1930. I'm sure you heard about that. Yeah, you've seen our review from, I don't even know, that was a long time ago. But this film, directed by Edward Berger, states itself as more of a readaptation of the book than a readaptation of the movie. But we are here to discuss this film, what happens, what we felt, how it impacted us. But before we do that, I have to remind you of what we talked about last time, because we talked about Everything Everywhere All at Once, directed by the Daniels. It's the only film on our list of the Best Picture nominees for 2023, so it's at the number one spot. But I must put in your mind the number to beat. If All Quiet on the Western Front wants to go above Everything Everywhere All at Once, it has to get at least a 9.21. It needs to beat a 9.2 in order to jump ahead and claim the top spot, which we shall see what happens. I don't know.
We shall see.
Oh, I know.
Tucker knows what's going to happen.
He knows already. Okay.
I took a look forward. I sped up on the YouTube thing. I checked the end there.
Oh, I see. Very clever, Tucker.
Mm-hmm. I do believe, before we dive into this film, we have a featured comment. Abram, you were looking through. Do we have anything that deserves to be read aloud?
Well, we got to do a little insider baseball, right? Of course, because at the time of recording, we haven't posted the Everything Everywhere review yet, so we don't have comments from that. But what I did do is I want to shout out two comments. I did a little patrolling through our YouTube channels, because there's two of them now. Remember, you are on Backlot Banter. Backlog Banter still exists for gaming content. I just want to shout out. I won't read the comment because it doesn't pertain. But John Tor commented on our most recent Nintendo video, so thank you, John Tor, for the support over there. But the comment I actually wanted to shout out comes from our 2023 live Oscar nominations reaction video.
Oh, really?
Because also nobody commented on your Sicko Infinity Pool review either. So, but Supermodel 2 did comment on our Oscars.
This is not a good sign.
Video.
The second ever.
This is a great comment. They got a creator heart. Great video. You guys are hysterical. I'm so happy my two favorite films, Triangle of Sadness and Women Talking, both snuck in for Best Picture. Love the Andrea Riseborough nomination. So happy for her as well. And I just wanted to read that out because I want to know, Supermodel 2, did you like that video so much that you stuck around and you subscribed and you're watching Quest? Because if you are, let me know in the comments. So. It's an open challenge.
This is for you, Supermodel 2.
Yes.
The ball's in your court. What you do with it is your decision.
Yeah.
Do
whatever you want with your balls.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take the ball into my court and tell Tanner, because you have a very Teutonic mustache today. Your Teutonic mustache is going to have to lead us through a plot synopsis of All Quiet on the Western Front. What happens in this movie on a lower level, on the lowest level? We can't get too much into it like we did last time with this question, but what happened?
What happens in All Quiet on the Western Front is we have our protagonist. And his name is Paul Baumer, okay? He's 17, 18, he's a young fella, a young man. And he's like, I want to join World War I because I am a young, patriotic German boy, and I want to fight for my country. And war just seems like a whole lot of fun. There's a whole lot of hullabaloo around it. Me and my friends gonna join up. And they do, and they discover, very quickly in fact, that war is hell. And there's actually a substantial time jump between the first experience Paul has and then the rest of the film takes place towards the tail end of World War I, following the German perspective, not only in Paul's case and in the soldiers on the ground, but also the negotiators and the generals who are calling the shots, all leading up to, of course, the final battle that takes place on the day, in the last minutes of World War I, where Paul meets his untimely and quite ironic demise, I would say.
Yeah.
Tanner, can you also hit us with those nominations?
Oh, Abram, I would love to. So obviously, we're talking about this film because it got nominated for Best Picture. It was also nominated for Best International Feature Film, the official submission from Germany. This is a German film, of course. Achievement in makeup and hairstyling. Achievement in music written for a motion picture, so the original score. Best sound, achievement in visual effects, adapted screenplay, cinematography, and production design. 9 noms for All Quiet on the Western Front.
9
Second
noms.
highest.
So Everything Everywhere had 11. This
Yes.
has 9. Are those
Tied
the
for
the top 2?
tied for second with Banshees. Banshees of Inisherin also has 9 nominations.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
With 4 of those being acting.
yeah.
Yes. These are all below the line, except for the screenplay and picture, of course.
Okay.
That's a lot. It's a good amount.
Mhm.
So what did you guys think of this movie? Really, truly, tell me. What are your thoughts on All Quiet on the Western Front?
All right, I won't lie this time.
Okay.
I usually do on Quest, but this time I'm making an
Sure.
exception because
Okay.
this is a great movie.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really difficult for us to not bring this into conversation with the 1930 version adaptation of the book, which of course this is as well, because the two share a lot of the similar plot beats. They share the same characters, and that was coloring my perspective on the movie. And I think that'll be interesting to bring them in the conversation in terms of this being a modern readaptation of it without the both the technical limitations that came with a movie being made in the 1930s versus Year of Our Lord 2021 or whatever this was made. And the difference in storytelling options and nuance in the acting, and of course the scope and scale and spectacle and everything that comes with a modern movie. And I think the two movies are quite they're on a similar level in my mind, in both being great. I think this one tips so much more into being immersive and engaging from a character perspective, because I think Paul Bauer in this movie does feel a lot more fleshed out. But I also think that it loses a little bit of what was so interesting about that first movie, was being made from an American perspective about the Germans not too long after the war, and having a few scenes that I think made the themes of that original movie, the first version of the book turned into a movie, hit a lot harder, that they chose to admit, or maybe weren't in the source material. I'm not familiar with the book, but I thought this was a great modern retelling of that. But there are some things that I think the original still has over this one.
Sure.
Abram, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this film is exceptional. We'll talk more about the comparisons to the original, so I'll not even mention that up top. But
No, why would you? You wouldn't even mention it in your opening statement. No.
God forbid. It ultimately, the film is very simple, and I think it succeeds by maintaining a very clear focus on what is ultimately a sort of, at this point, tired but sort of perennially important theme about war being bad. I mean, it's an anti-war piece, and it doesn't really try to be much more than that, but I think it's successful to that end because it focuses so much on just this sort of gut level disgust that sort of builds and builds and builds as the film goes along, to the point where the last 45 minutes or so, as the armistice is being signed, I'm like, man, there's a lot of movie left, and it just led to this dread that sunk into my stomach. As I'm like, we're not making it out of this still. It's not over. And I think by hinging so centrally around a very small group of characters and one core idea, we just really bore far into that. And the way we do it is with just technically immaculate filmmaking. I think that this, like Dune, is going to just clean up. Because,
We'll see.
yeah, I mean, it is a beautiful film. It is a haunting film. And it's just so impressive. And I think that's part of what makes it so scary. So I was very, very much enthralled by All Quiet on the Western Front.
Tanner, I'm going to steal your thunder and go next. And
Go right ahead.
I agree with you guys in a lot. I found this film to just be horrifying. I was quaking in my seat as I sat at home watching it up on the big screen. Like, I was downright terrified watching this film. And I think that the technical advancements in the last 100 years have really propelled the ability to communicate what the original was trying to communicate into a new realm of viscerality. I mean, it's like just the screams and the blood and the trenches and the mud and the water and the explosions, and just like how real it felt, and how much I felt I was in that situation. Were just it was totally all encompassing, really. I was very, very immersed in the film. And I think that the added context that it gives to what is going on politically, what the generals think, how
Absolutely.
the politicians are trying to sign and save lives, but the French are, they want the sign, but
They've
don't.
drawn a line in the sand.
They are
they're
not
like,
gonna,
these are our terms.
like,
Yeah.
we're gonna continue slaughtering you unless you sign this. And so I find that works. I am kind of questioning, however, how much I feel the characters in this version. There are time skips. I agree that Paul is a very, I think he is fleshed out. I think that the film does a lot of communication visually, especially about how characters are feeling and how they've changed. And so while I get what Paul's arc is, some of the other characters, I feel like I'm missing a little bit because to me, the film plays out in a series of vignettes. We have the beginning
Absolutely.
and the middle, and it kind of goes along with the music, what themes are being played in the soundtrack. And so I enjoyed it, but I found myself just, again, thinking about how it compares to the other film, the 1930 version, and I came up enjoying it a lot. I just have some stuff to work through, I think, with its difference between the original.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously the exact same boat, but I do think it's most important to start with where I think this film, outside of the technical aspects, which we'll obviously spend a long time about, get into, which is
Tucker,
the main.
We're missing the boy.
You gotta let Tanner give
too
his
excited.
thoughts too.
Before we start, can we get to my opening thoughts, please?
Oh,
See,
I forget about
you
you
know what, Tucker?
sometimes.
I don't blame you, Tucker. Timo threw a wrench in it. He went before me. Typically,
True.
Timo goes last, but
Yeah,
I mean, I
sorry.
don't have a whole lot else to add.
We took
other
all your
than
points.
yes, this film is a technical marvel on all fronts. And Timo, I disagree. Actually, I think that I think this film especially hinges on the performance of Felix Kammerer as Paul, and not necessarily a character arc for him, but he is what makes it immersive, and the direction and everything else, of course. But I think he is an integral piece, a cog in this machine of immersing you in the hell of war, the blur of it, the horror of it, and everything. The transformation that his character Paul goes through is fantastic and very impressive for a performer who this is his first feature film.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Yeah, I actually
Crazy.
agree with you on Paul's performance. I think it's maybe in the side characters that were a little bit lacking.
Now, Tucker, take it away.
Well, you actually made this transition both worse because you made me stumble, but better because you were able to give your thoughts. And my thoughts were what I was about to get into is let's talk about Felix Kammerer and how his performance as Paul Baumer is
It's Boimer,
really the
by
central Boimer. Is the central conceit of why I think this film is definitely better than the first one in that specific regard. The amount of emotion and exhaustion that is portrayed on this guy's face is incredible. He doesn't have a ton of lines. When he does, they're delivered perfectly adequately, but I think that it is that physical performance, the facial performance that really sells, as you were saying, the horrors of this war, especially when mixed with the makeup and hairstyling, which is mud everywhere.
Mud.
And different kinds of mud, and different colors of mud, and different thicknesses of mud, and how his face emotes through these different layers of grime, and the visual experience that you see of has been actually caked onto him due to the things that he's gone through is top-notch stuff. And I do think that, honestly, especially because of how muddy the World War I trenches are and all that, that's probably the best visual representation I've seen of the horrors of war on one person's body through the face, and the incredible skill of the makeup team to make mud out of makeup stuff and make it look like he just fell in the mud and that was what was left on him. That's a technical marvel and a performance marvel.
Yeah, he's got a really good set of eyes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's true.
One thing you can never take away from this young man is he got just a really nice pair of peepers. And I think that does a lot of the work, because you're right, Tucker. It's this juxtaposition between this incredibly heavy makeup. I want to touch on this scene in much greater detail, but when he kills the Frenchman in that big mud puddle, and he's got this it looks almost like a turtle shell of mud on his face. It's so pronounced.
half down. Yeah.
Yeah, and his eyes are just so wide, and they communicate a lot. And another great moment being after he's been stabbed, as the film is ending. There's that shot that was very iconic, sort of as the film was being marketed, of him sort of looking up at the coming out of the trench as the war is done. Just like that, the look he can convey is really impressive because you're right. This is a pretty spare film in terms of dialogue. We do have is incredibly intentional, which
Should have
sort
a
of
screenplay.
and I want to talk about the screenplay because I think it's very good.
Yes.
But it sort of forced our actors to sort of find in their body the emotion that maybe the script doesn't convey that much.
Yeah.
So I just think it's incredibly effective, and it's that harmony, as you're saying, Tucker, between the eyes and the mud that really sells the performance.
I want to give
My
you
two
one
favorite
more
things.
camera look that sells it for me, that sells his performance for me, and also sells the arc of Paul and the whole film. And that is after his best friend Kat has been pronounced dead. After he drags him back from this forest, and he brings him there, and the doctor's like, "This guy died. I don't know what to tell you, buddy. Sorry." And he lost the one friend he had left.
Yeah.
And on the day that they knew the war was ending, nonetheless, and then the general comes out. He says, "Gather all the recruits. We're going back one more time. We're doing it before 11 o'clock, before the war ends."
Yeah.
And he is juxtaposed by all these extras who are like new recruits. They're clearly like 15, 16 maybe. And he is not much older, but he looks so much more haggard. The bags under his eyes, the ashen makeup on his face, as he just has a 1,000-yard stare up at the general giving these orders. And that's the moment where I'm like, that's the moment where Abram, you said this line earlier, we're not making it out of this. I think that's a real common sentiment in this film, that try as he might and as close as he gets, Paul's not making it out of this.
Yeah, that's a point that I really want to jump off of because, I think it's a little cliche to be like, whenever you're critiquing a war movie, to be like, oh, like, this movie, there's no way to make an anti-war movie. And
Antoine Truffaut.
yeah, this is the Truffaut quote. It's brought up all over the place in the criticism of this movie because I think that very feeling of we're not making out of this situation pervades the film. And in the film lets us know from the beginning that we are not making out of it. We're not getting out of this war alive. And so the way that as an anti-war film, this posits the idea not just that war is bad. And I think that the message of the film is a lot more unique and nuanced than just like war is bad, like something that we would get from The Hurt Locker or Platoon, which complicates war and shows its many different facets. But this one, in its World War I futility, there is the film, I think, goes to great lengths to make our battles pointless. You can't tell where the lines are. It doesn't look like they move at all in years, and they didn't really. The pointlessness and the endless death of this war is shown in a way that I think a lot of other war films like struggle to. Hollywood wants our hero to live. We want our the protagonists to be able to like make it through, because
End up with the girl at the end.
yeah, that's
Have their actions mean something.
and in some of the reviews of this film that I read that reference some other movies, like what people think, and I agree, makes a really good war film is to make the main character is like literally has to die. Like they have to die if you're going to make the film have an anti-war message, because otherwise you are selling the myth that you'll make it out, when in this film that myth I think is thoroughly debunked.
Yeah, I think the script does a lot of the heavy lifting in front. So the scenario that we ended up playing out, especially in the last 45 minutes of the film, which I think is really, really masterful. But I think there's also some other more subtle technical elements that sell this from the very beginning. This one isn't particularly subtle, but I think as sound man, you'll like this, Timo, and I love this moment a lot. In our first march with these men towards the front, they're singing a song about like it's like I'm gonna marry a girl when I come home, or wait a year, or whatever it is. And we hear this heavy like synth organ
Incredible moment.
dirge going bum 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 as they're singing, and it's not even like it's harmonized together or like it's intentional. It's these people are doing something, but there's a much stronger and larger force that doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
communicated through that sound design.
Yeah,
I
and
think
the
the score-
juxtaposition of the two.
Yeah. And the sort of lack of congruity. It's drowning out what they're trying to sing, but not in a harmonious way. It's very cacophonous.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly effective.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I think that score that is very scintillating, as you said, and it sounds almost modern, like it's a modern factory, like grinding its gears without any worry about like how many human souls are like being fed into it.
Mhm.
That is immediately one of the most impactful things about this film to me is that musical cue of the synth score hitting 3 times, ba ba ba, is played so many times throughout the film that by the end, and it's hitting less frequently, but it's still there every once in a while. Every time it comes in, that same feeling of dread hits me, and it's, I think, because it's juxtaposed so uneasy, makes you so uneasy at when the first time it's played over the group of boys like heading off to war with a smile on their face, and you're like, no, the machine of war is coming to chew you up and not spit you out, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if if that cue would fall under the score or the sound, which is why I'm sure it got both nominations.
It is the score.
The category
I
is the
listened to the
score.
entire score on
Yeah.
YouTube, and that's most of it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's really interesting. And I know we said we want to talk about the screenplay. And I think this is a good point to bring up differences between the 1930 version and the 2022 version, of course.
Yeah.
There are a few key differences that I feel.
Mhm.
And Tucker, you just recently today listened to our review of the 1930 version, and maybe we'll have a little banner or something pop up at some point in the video. A link down in the description maybe as well if you want to listen back to that as well. But from memory, I don't recall any focus on the generals or politicians in that film.
No, none.
Which I feel is a very key element of this film.
Absolutely.
And we can start there, but I want to point out a few others. The lack of a scene where Paul goes back to his hometown and sort of tries to debunk this nationalistic rhetoric that's being spread. That's missing here. And I think it's really interesting. But we can start out with the politicians and the generals and things of that nature.
Can I just ask, because you
Yes.
guys clearly the plot of the 1930s film left a better impression on you guys than it did of me, because I think back and I remember the bombing sequence, and I remember the
Just here.
the stuff over the boots, which is not here.
Mhm.
Yes, that also. Yeah.
But Paul doesn't die at the end of the 30s one, does he?
He does. Absolutely, he does. He gets hit by a sniper and dies in a
That's
mud
what it-
puddle as a
right,
butterfly
the
lands on his
butterfly
finger.
in the can. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, so he dies, and we talked a little bit of that in our review, in which Timo remarked that it was a very bold choice to have all the characters die, and that's absolutely true for the 30s. I think it maybe feels a little less unique here because we've had almost 100 years worth of films where that's happened multiple times. But I think that it is in those differences where this movie is most conflicted in my mind. Like, is it better than the original one or not? Because Tanner, I agree that the stuff about the politicians is the most unique part of this movie, especially when you're comparing it to the 1931, is learning about the war from that perspective and having Baron Zemo himself come on stage and try to negotiate things.
Yeah.
That is where I think the movie is most interesting on a script perspective, and cutting in between them, like struggling to just talk to another person in order to figure things out, to, okay, well, while that's going on, like the minutes are ticking and we're seeing his friends get shot down. I think that's fantastic. But I do think that lacking a few of the scenes that for me were most impactful in the 1930s version makes me wonder if it lands its themes as well as the 1931, which is the scene of him going back home to his hometown and ending up in the classroom, which is reminiscent of where that original film started, of receiving the propaganda. And he's in the classroom talking to a bunch of kids who are like, we're very excited to go to war. And he's like, no, war is bad. And that was one of the most impactful scenes of that film. And it's obviously not present here. And same with the thing about the boots is I thought that thematically was very fascinating in the 1930 movie.
Wait,
about
remind me what that scene is happening, because I think something similar happens in this film.
the thing about the boots in that movie is that we see a pair of boots transferred from person to person, that the boots are longer lasting and more important to the military than the bodies that they're on, which I think is a really interesting, not only visually, like seeing it, the same boots cut between people and watching them wear over time, but thematically, like that's a fascinating cinematic statement.
Well, there's also a personal element to it, because obviously that is sort of how the film begins, as we meet Heinrich. Who
Yeah,
then
this film uses
that's a
the
great point.
jacket to do that, I think.
Yeah.
But what the original does that this one doesn't, though, is that sort of the boots become like a symbol of envy as the soldiers try to take them from each other,
Yeah.
which is the component that isn't here.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot more camaraderie in this version than in the original, as it's coming back to me now.
Yeah.
Talked about that one, but
Maybe left a little bit of an impact.
a little bit.
It's a deep impact, if you will.
That's a movie
Armageddon.
reference.
No.
What was I gonna say? Okay. So on the note of the politicians and the generals, Tucker, you brought up Baron Zemo, and I like Daniel Bruhl in this, but I think he kind of gets his plate eaten by whoever plays the general in this. I think he is far more fascinating a tertiary character, largely because he is where the sort of obsession with war comes in. He is the rock on which that thematic point is planted. He has a number of lines and things like that. I wrote one down here. When he's talking to some sort of messenger or politician or something like that, lower ranking person, and he's talking about his father. And, this is a very common sentiment, and really why he and the rest of the German generals and politicians want to continue the war is because there's this reverence for it amongst them, amongst the people who actually don't have to fight. They're like, my father, he fought in 3 wars and he won them all, and he won them for the fatherland, and man, he loved Germany. And I was born 50 years too late, 50 years without war. Imagine how that softens a nation, how that softens a people. And all these things, all this nationalistic fascist rhetoric that he's spouting. And I think that's really interesting because that character is absent in the 1930 version. But I think both films do a good job of, and it was fascinating for the 1930s as well, because obviously we didn't have the Nazis in World War II yet at that point.
We didn't know what the result
the
of
fascism
World War.
was leading to. And now looking back now at 2022, looking back, I think there's a different context to it, but the message remains the same, which is why I don't lament the loss of the classroom speech too much. I think that the ideas are still there.
I'm throwing it to Timo. You circle back to me.
I really appreciate the context that we are given to the battles that including the generals and the negotiations give. I mean, I think it really increases the meaninglessness of the combat when you see that, like, the war is over and, like, that they've signed and that they're gonna stop fighting, and that the only reason that it was signed, that the armistice went into effect on the 11th hour, the 11th day, of the 11th month, was so that it literally could be 11/11. Like, they did that so that it would be poetic and they were, like, adding meaning
what a coincidence.
to the end of the war when there was no meaning in the war. And so and as a result of the generals trying to do that, thousands more men died in the trench. And so I think that it's really, incredible to see these aspects of the film, and you're right, Tanner, in that it lends us to see how World War I leads to German fascism, which in history it does very clearly, but I don't think very many films have, like, tried to even just explain that idea.
Sure.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to Tucker, your kind of point about that classroom scene, because I think that message is still conveyed, but on a very personal level, when that brand new recruit, the young kid, the one that looks like he grew up to be Matt Damon in Saving Private Ryan, that one, when he we see him get off of his transport, and he doesn't even know how to put the strap on his helmet on, right? These are basically the kids that Paul talked to in the 1930s version, but just already on the battlefield, completely clueless.
Yeah.
And there's that moment when the kid firsthand recognizes that this is fucked, because he sees Paul, who is so close in age to him. And there's this moment where we just see on his face his reaction to finding Paul's body in particular. And I think that sort of characteristic or emblematic is the word I'm looking for of how this film operates in large part and part of why I like it so much. Because it does remind me of Dune and other films that I really enjoy.
No director nomination, but lots of tech nominations,
Very
just
similar.
like Dune.
Yeah. In terms of how we really use filmic affordances and visual motifs to convey a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I think that small moment of taking Paul's tag is a great sort of substitute in the style of this film for what that classroom scene was for the 30s version.
Absolutely true.
Here's a
And-
difference that
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Timo.
I think the way that this film deals with remember back to the 30s movie, there's a part where they enter into the French village kind of as German occupiers, and they meet some women and they have a good
Yes.
time. This film
Great minds, Timo. Great minds.
takes that away from us while including it in the plot. Because one of
Yeah.
the dudes, I think maybe it's Mueller, Felix.
Franz.
Who knows? They're all these German names. Yeah, it's Mueller. It's Franz. He goes off.
Franz, not Franz. Oh, sorry. Felix is the name of the actor.
The
not
cat.
the actor.
He's
My
the
bad.
cat.
You're right. Franz.
No, Cat's the friend with the mustache. Oh, we have fun. Continue, Timo.
So Franz goes off and has a good time with this French girl, and we never really see any of it. We never really hear any about it, except that all the other guys want to sniff the handkerchief, and that for all of them, that's the only that's the closest touch of the woman that they're gonna have for like the last 2 years of their lives. They don't even.
Relatable, yeah.
And so I think that was a choice that I appreciated, to yank that out of the film, because it makes
Sure,
it more desperate and it makes it more horrific, really, for these men to be there.
Because, just as a side note, that kid takes the handkerchief also
Mhm.
at the end.
Yeah.
Who has no connection to any of those people.
Timo, thank you for bringing that up. I was actually going the exact same place, because I have actually seen with my eyes and heard with my ears, experienced all three versions of this adaptation now. The 1930 version, the 2022 version, and the 1979 version. We watched that for a class in high school. And
Directed by Delbert Mann, director of Marty. In
Yeah, exactly.
1955
Very
Best Picture winner.
Yeah. And the scenes that stick with me through the 1930 version and the 1979 version they're twofold. The scene where they go into the French village and they meet the women, which is, we see that happen in both those previous versions. And I think on top of the classroom scene that we were talking about, the 2022 Edward Berger film is much more concerned with keeping us confined and trapped in war on the battlefield, giving us no reprieve. Even when we're not with Paul and his friends, we are with the negotiators talking about the war. We are with the general planning the war, talking about how great the war is and how they're going to win this thing despite everything. I think we are trapped and confined to the battlefield. The other scene that I remember from all three versions now, and probably will as I look back on these adaptations, is the scene in the crater with Paul and the French soldier.
Oh, man.
Where he stabs him over and over and over, and then sort of looks back at what he's done and then tries to save him. That is present in all three versions, and I think it is probably the most affecting scene for me in all three personally.
Yeah. This film, I think, does it really, really well. The way that
absolutely.
crater is larger, the way that we just spend so much time and see Paul struggle because he kills him. He's got the life and death challenge, and then he has the realization, oh my God, what have I done? And just to see Paul stand over the top of this French soldier's body for so long. The film just holds us there as this guy dies. It seems like forever. It feels like it takes him 10 minutes to die. And we got to sit there and watch it the whole time. And it is just horrifying. My favorite version of the scene.
Yeah, I think it's disgusting. I gagged a little bit when and I think it speaks sort of the emotional depth of the scene when Paul not only realizes what he's done, but realizes that he's not going to die quickly, and he goes and he grabs handfuls of mud, and shoves mud into the guy's throat.
That's a crazy moment.
Just trying to shut him up, so he can't hear him anymore.
Yeah.
it's horrifying. I mean, it is a truly, truly horrifying sequence, and I think there's something there's a realism in the length of time this plays out. And sort of a funny comparison to draw, but I was rewatching the shootout from Heat this morning.
Sure.
Of course I was. And there's people in the comments talking about, man, it's so realistic that when Val Kilmer gets shot, even though he just like gets clipped like on his shoulder, he's out. Because when people get hurt in real life, or you get shot or you're injured in some way, it's not quick. It's not, oh, either I'm standing up or I'm dead right away.
Mm-hmm.
There's in Hollywood likes to make that time from the point of impact to death as fast as possible in a lot of situations. And this is the complete opposite of that. And it takes, I think, a lot of directorial strength to leave us in that moment for so long. And it connects back to what we were saying about Paul and sort of the depth of that performance, because we just see him on that bank for so long. So many shots of just his eyes reacting, and then when he goes and lies down on the guy's chest, and it's his face into the chest, and just the muddied, Dr. Jekyll side of his face is what's to the camera.
No,
I think it's
Mr. Hyde.
Is that the bad one?
Yes.
But Dr. Jekyll sounds like it should be the bad one.
Don't worry
I think
about
it's
it.
because you have the association with Mr. Hyde.
Bad people can't be doctors, Abram.
Great.
But I just think that scene is not only really gross in an important way, but I think it's emblematic of sort of the texture to this film in terms of the realism of its violence, the lack of glamour, and just the intense focus on performance and filmic technique to convey. Other than him yelling, "Comrade, comrade, comrade," I don't think they say anything in that sequence.
Yeah. I think that what this film does almost better than any war film that I can think of is make you realize by the end of the film, which of course we all already have this thought going into the film, but that every life that is taken, whether it's a bullet to the head or someone stabbed and they're dying slowly, that it is a human life. This is someone whose life, who has a child, who has a family, who has a wife, who has other things that they are thinking the same stresses. They don't want to be here as much as Paul doesn't want to be here, or whoever it is doesn't want to be here. And that you like retroactively apply the emotions that you're feeling watching this Frenchman die, who we never knew his name. We only know that Paul regrets his actions in that moment, and regrets them even more when he learns about his family and takes the papers out of his pocket and looks at the picture of his wife and daughter. And that sort of retroactively informs and continues to inform as we watch more people die throughout the film, that no matter which side the life is on and someone is dying, that is a person dying. And that's like the most powerful thing I think can be conveyed in any war film or anti-war film, is about the loss of human life on a very personal and real level. Is sometimes viscerality can be so gratuitous and ridiculous it feels like entertainment value. It's like, oh, look at the production of this. Look at how crazy this is, and you're thinking about it on a political level and like how this in fact impacted the economics or the global situation. But it is about those moments one-on-one in the trenches. Not only when Paul kills that Frenchman in the crater, but when he almost kills the other Frenchman in the bunker at the end, and because of his lack of killing him, he gets stabbed in the back by a bayonet and then stumbles outside and dies. And that is just a perfect connection of that character arc in the darkest way possible, because he learned his mistake, but in learning that, it led to his demise in the last 0.04 milliseconds of the war or whatever.
Yeah. And Tucker, you talk about that, and here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna side with old Frankie T over here, old Francois Truffaut, and say that there is no such thing as an anti-war film, because yes, All Quiet on the Western Front does have all these things that we're talking about, displaying the horror, the inhumanity of it all, the fascist rhetoric that can so easily co-opt wars and is often the spurring behind it. But at the same time, these scenes where we're rushing the trenches are pretty thrilling. There's two times where I think it happens, especially when Paul and his fellow soldiers are just kind of clearing house in these trenches. When it's almost like like a modern action film when they are just stabbing people, shooting people, blah blah blah, moving through, and we're seeing people die all around, of course, but our primary characters are like doing some badass action stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are thrilling sequences, and they're obviously very technically well done. They are directed very well, and the moments are memorable. Like especially the one leading up to them, sort of. They fight their way through this French trench, and then they go in, and there's like a little setup of food, and they're scarfing this food down that the French people had. And then the tanks come, which I want to talk about. But
Mm-hmm.
I think these battle sequences are still thrilling. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. I really love the tank sequence in that it's like just the confusion and the carnage that is caused by these new elements. What a way to like take your setting and your conflict and then be like, okay, stakes times a million now that there are tanks around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it works really
Start
well.
phase 2 of the boss fight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's see, Tanner, I think you're right, but ultimately, if you were to make a ratio of where things
Yes.
look cool to where they're fucking crazy awful, I think that the latter wins pretty handily. Because even the thought you raised, Tanner, crossed my mind quite similarly in that final charge, where Paul really is fucking people up.
Yeah.
And like Call of Duty, like prone diving onto his gun to grab it and reload and kill people,
Mm-hmm.
or the moment when he's sort of running over the trench and then he jumps down onto a guy to kill him. But what I think is interesting even about that construction is that the Frenchman he jumps onto was about to kill a kid that looked like he was maybe 15, just like sitting in the trench. There's always this sort of malicious element to it.
Yeah.
And it sort of reminds me almost of sort of the misreadings of like an American Psycho or things like that.
Sure.
To where if you want to read this as Paul is cool, you can, but you're taking the wrong lesson out of it.
Yeah, of course. And people often do. There's going to be
Right.
TikTok edits of people like, man,
Of
look
course.
how cool All Quiet on the Western Front is. Stabbing people, shooting people, explosions. Man, look at
That's
this
sad.
awesome movie.
Oh my god, I don't want to think about that.
But at the same time, to Tucker's point
That's a
about
lot.
character arc,
Uh-huh.
we go from Paul firing a singular shot into a dead corpse and then getting almost headshotted
Mm-hmm.
back into a trench to him killing all these people. I think that says a lot about sort of the sort of animalizing or the
Yeah,
dehumanizing of Paul. So I think that's present, but no scene I think sort of marries that spectacle with that horror better than the tanks.
Yes.
But in particular, the retreat after the retreat from the tanks, when the flamethrowers are there, people are just getting
Crazy.
ruined.
There's like
And
the one
yeah.
wide shot of the battle of the film is from that scene where we're way, way, way up high, and they're using like their entire set they're using for that shot, and you can see the the flame shoot out from a soldier and burn someone else alive, and like we are so intimately connected to the small scale battle during the entirety of the film that this one moment where we zoom way out and you're like, yeah, this is happening everywhere for miles along this line.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Continue, Abram.
If I can, because there's one other moment of it's a little bit tangential, but of great violence that I think is worth pointing out, and it actually sort of undercuts what I was saying, that there is no analog to the men being envious over each other's boots in this film, because I think there is. It's the other scene that really freaked me out. It's when we deliver the soup to what's his name, Jardin, I believe.
Chodden.
And we see him pick up a fork and he's looking at it. And then we cut away and we cut back and he is stabbing himself in the neck over and over and over again to kill himself with a fork.
Yeah.
Like it's disgusting. But then
Even thinking about that makes my stomach turn. I think that's the most like technically impressive and viscerally upsetting scene in the movie, because I've seen a lot of throats slit in horror movies, in real life,
action movies,
but I've never seen anyone in a film that desperate to end their own life and done with that amount of like realism to the wound on his neck and the fork going in and out and the blood coming out. That is insane. We were watching this. I was watching this with Rachel, and I was grabbing onto her arm as hard as I could while I was watching that, because it was like it impacted me on a level that very few violent sequences in movies do, because I've seen a lot of this. This happens more and more and more as we see movies and as the technology to portray violence improves. But that is like, that'll stick with me as one of the most impactful moments of visual violence I've ever seen in a film.
But there's a cut. Then the camera cuts and adds a lot of emotional depth because we see that a random guy is eating the bowl of soup as he's watching two other soldiers try to hold this man's like cartilage into his neck.
Yeah,
and I think that is such a clear symbol of this dehumanization that we're discussing through Paul's arc in the action sequence.
Yeah, I remember watching that scene, and it gets to him stabbing it, and my brain instinctively, my intrusive thoughts of that moment was like, boom, I'm thinking about something totally random, totally like some joke or something from a long time ago. Like that scene was so horrifying because I think not only that it's very well done and it's very realistic, but it is a character that we know and it is someone that we care about when we see this happen. And so we feel very much in the protagonist's shoes. That scene literally made my brain go into like fight or flight mode and like think about other shit so that I would stop paying so much attention to the movie and not be like scarred by it. My brain was like, it was very like, block this. No, we don't, like, why are you watching this? Think about something else. Think happy thoughts instinctively. I was trying to watch and pay attention as I always do when I'm watching a movie, but this time like my brain was fighting me on it on some of these scenes. And that one in particular was like definitely the strongest.
Since we're speaking of Chiaden, I do want to quick shout out to the makeup team. He has like one eye that's like pink and like the iris is yellow. That was I don't know if he had that for the whole film or if that was like a thing that was added to when he was obviously dying in that courtyard.
I think he had it a long
soldiers.
time because I remember noticing it earlier in the film.
Yeah. And I don't know. I would imagine that that's a makeup thing and not a actual thing that the actor has, but I could be wrong. But I assumed it was a makeup thing. I was like, that's just a cool touch to make your character visually interesting and to set them apart from the rest of these soldiers. I had something else that I wanted to bring up, and now it is escaping me.
Well,
the camaraderie. I want to talk about the gooses, the geese. Because I think we pretty immediately after our time jump, after 18-month time jump, we first see Paul and Kat by that French farm trying to sneak in and steal a goose so they can have it and go back to their buddies in their cabin or whatever and eat some goose soup. And I think it's really interesting because the difference between the color grading outside, we're ashen, we're overcast. Thank you, brain. And everything when they're stealing the goose, and then we get to inside that cabin, and it's very warm lighting. People are jumping around. People are laughing. People are slopping their soup into their mouths and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, this is like the one happy moment of the film, and then we don't get one ever again after that. But I think the camaraderie is very evident there, as well as the seeding of that French family's farm, which obviously comes around at the end when the little boy kills Kat.
Yeah.
I think that now is a good chance to also talk about the supporting cast of characters that Paul has that camaraderie with, because I don't remember who it was, but I think one of you guys said earlier that their performances didn't hit you as hard. I think that's true for me as well. I think that the thing that holds me back from this being one of my favorite war movies ever, this or the 1930s version, is that the characters in both of these films are very simple. They are not explored in great depth. They have personality while they're on screen, but we don't feel intimately connected with them. We obviously don't know that much about their backstories or whatever it is. And as someone who is very much a character person when I'm watching films, and it is learning about the people in Platoon or Hurt Locker that makes me love those films so much. I respect the different path to telling a story about war through characters that are relatively simplistic and not as fleshed out, but it is something that holds both these films back just a little bit for me.
Yeah, I think I was the one who said that. I think thinking about it now, the way I meant it earlier was that the this film's time jumpy nature, and given that we're mostly focused on Paul, leads me to kind of feel like our side characters are a bit underdeveloped in that
Yeah.
I like know who they are, I can recognize them by face and by name, and yet like I don't know so much more about them, and I feel like the earlier film I felt like the group as a whole more as like a character, like the group of boys
Yeah.
outside
There's
of
much more balance in terms of screen time.
Mhm.
Paul is much greater a focus here than the first one.
yeah, so but does that I don't know, what we've been talking about, does that make it like a negative in my mind? Because I think the film makes up for it in other regards. The film is talking about other things, and it could be that we don't have so much characterization for these guys because how much does Paul really know them? How much does Paul really know these people he just meets, like Kat? Or and he certainly doesn't know most of the characters who die around in the film. And so if we review it maybe more as a perspective piece, as we are looking at this through Paul's eyes, then it could explain it perhaps.
I think that's a possible reading, but I don't think that's accurate because he spent 18 months with these guys
Mhm.
in trenches, and they had to have talked.
Yeah.
They had to have shared their stories. Like you don't have like months worth of downtime cumulatively and don't get to know the guys that are like keeping you alive by your side. So I don't think that's necessarily true, but it is an interesting reading for why the film is so distant.
I mean, I don't. First of all, I think that some films are just inherently told in a cold respect with
Yeah.
distance to them, and that's the intent of the characters. But I'm not even necessarily sure I agree that this film is that distant because I think we're underselling how efficient the development of the relationship between Kat and Paul is. Because I think it's actually very effective in that we're sort of allowed to fill in the gaps. At a certain point, do I really need to see them develop a friendship, or can I just take the time jump and they're stealing a goose together?
Mhm.
For me, I can take that time jump because after that, not only do we see them steal the goose and have that conversation together, but while we're in this moment of away from the front lines, there's that really exceptional scene where Paul reads out the letter that Kat's wife wrote
Great
to
scene.
him.
Yeah.
And in that, we learn a lot about, obviously on just like an expository level, we learn a lot about Kat, but we also learn sort of subtly what the relationship between these two people is,
Mhm.
and sort of the codependency that's formed between them.
Yeah.
As we sort of look as Paul looks to Kat for like a physical guidance and a physical presence in the war, as Kat looks to Paul for like an intellectual understanding of the world that he himself doesn't have, and he reiterates across the film during key moments, like when he says, "Paul, if you don't go to university, I'm gonna kill you," and things like that. As a joke, we see this father-son relationship develop, but we're only given through dialogue the sort of base information we would need. Beyond that, it's a lot through, again, physical action, through this protracted sequence of trying to find Kat when we return from the fucking hole in the ground sequence. I can't remember the word right now. After that, or as we see them run together with a goose in a field, or they're making jokes as they're stealing eggs, or whatever. I think we get that. And even in the case of Franz, there's this understanding that they're close as they're sort of lying in opposite bunks together, talking about, oh, so what was it like? And he's like, oh, she had big boobs or whatever. And that's like, there's this feeling that they are friends, and we know that. I just don't think that this is a film that wants to be very talkative. And when it does speak, it gives us these sort of nodes that we can stitch together to develop these relationships in something bigger. So I actually found it to be a very efficient way to talk about the supporting cast. And I was quite impressed with them, particularly Kat and Paul's relationship.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
definitely the best part.
I think Tucker, you said at the beginning how we brought up how there's very sparse dialogue in this, and you made a remark about, hey, it got nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. But this is a great reminder that screenplay does not equal dialogue.
Yeah.
Screenplay equals story. Screenplay equals character arcs. Screenplay equals, just the screenplay can even equal like a singular mood in a scene or across a film. One moment that I'm very glad that they included in this screenplay is when these guys are a vignette, as Timo said, when the troop is sent out to find, oh, we're missing like 60 recruits. Go find out what happened to them. And we go, and it becomes like a horror movie for a scene when we're creeping around this abandoned factory or rail yard or something. And one of them is like chatting up a poster on the wall because these guys haven't seen a woman for 2 years or a year and a half, I guess, at that point. But we enter this room, and the way that the camera is positioned, you never really fully see the scope of the bodies until they leave the room. But like, they're just all dead, just splayed out in this room, a room full of bodies. And it's shot and feels like a horror film scene. And it's such an interesting way to, just subtly change up the feel and aesthetic of this film. And I do want to shout out Edward Berger more because we haven't talked about the direction specifically a whole lot. I feel he was snubbed for a nomination, but we could talk about that more in specifics if you guys want to. Otherwise, I have other moments we can talk about, quickly about the other nominations it got. Where do you want to go?
I want to hit cinematography and sound design as a duo piece right here. Starting off with the camera side of it. Obviously compare this film a lot to 1917, and I think what this film succeeds in where 1917 falls a little short is in the message. Because the way that we use the camera in a very similar manner to 1917, we have long takes, we stay with the characters, makes us feel very in the moment, but the film doesn't lock itself into that method of filmmaking, and so can use editing and whatnot to move us around in the story and make us feel more.
Time jumps, other locations.
Yes, it allows us to, I think it takes the best elements of that film's cinematography and uses them for the moments that are very useful in this film, which are the running around the trenches and going into battle. I think this film, you can just say that it copied it, but because it does this other stuff so well, I think that it really succeeds more than 1917 does. And then, okay, go ahead, comment, but I've got sound too.
I want to talk about sound, but I want to directly jump off of what you said, the idea that we're using the camera to sort of communicate theme. My favorite shot in the entire film is it's this far away shot as like the sun is rising of the men marching single file, but they march all the way from one end off of one side of the frame all the way off the other in a continuous motion. It is just this wave of sort of unidentifiable soldiers marching to the point where you could loop that as a GIF and they would keep going. And I think it's an example of how the camera is used to reinforce these ideas of this futility. That line of men is just going to keep marching. There is no start and there is no stop. So I just think that's my favorite shot of the film.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, obviously the camera work and the editing in those action sequences, the battle sequences, is really impressive work. It does feel like we're recapturing some of that energy that 1917 was so remarkable at just a few years ago. Obviously that being the modern war film touchstone for people of our age. Of course, you can draw parallels to Saving Private Ryan and Platoon and other war movies. But I think that for me, it is not only the fact that those are so well done, but that the cinematography is so remarkable in other ways that makes this a very worthy Best Picture nomination for me. It is the shots of German forests. It is the shots of the sun rising. This really incredible shot that is just a sky and a tree down in the very bottom corner of the screen. And I'm like, that is a use of negative space and a framing that is so bold. And another shot that really sticks with me, and they drew attention to it because they knew it was fucking awesome, is this tree that's standing there, and the sun is right in the middle of the branches, like peeking out, and the sun's rays are like, because of the camera lenses, they're peeking out over the rest of the tree, and it's those moments of nature that are untouched by war, juxtaposed by the just complete fucking obliteration of these battlefields. They are unrecognizable mud and crater and wood and blood and bone areas with like the occasional tree stump, and you're like, wait. This used to be a forest. There used to be trees and plants and flowers and animals here, but the war has turned this field into something that may never come back from this because it's so horrifyingly scarred.
Yeah, Tucker, obviously, there are great moments of direction and cinematography in those battle sequences that make them so compelling and thrilling, as we talked about. But I do love that Edward Berger and the cinematographer James Friend just like kind of flex on us sometimes, especially at the very beginning. They're just like, here's some incredible just shots for you, just for your Oscar reel, Academy.
Just some shots for you.
Yeah, just a ultra wide shot, and it holds for a little bit on the silence, and then off in the distance, miles and miles away, there's like the shells start going off, and you're like, oh, there's the war's happening over there, and then you get like a straight up at the sun, and all the trees are coming up in the forest.
That's a crazy shot.
And then there's like a close up, like a fox in a den. It's just like, yeah, we're just flexing on you. We're just showing you some cool stuff right now, some cool shots. What do you think? Oh, worthy of a nomination? I say yes. And if I can predict a little bit, a win, I would say.
Yeah, I gotta see more of the ones in the category. But Timo, just as we delayed, just as your actions caused Tanner to almost lose his opening statement, my actions almost caused you to lose your sound talk. So I want to give that back.
Yeah,
to you.
well, Tanner, you mentioning that opening scene and how we hear off in the distance the sound of war, the sound of shells. This film is gonna win sound. It's got the best sound because going back
there's a little film called Top Gun out there that's really
we shall see.
We shall see. The real competition, I would say.
Yeah.
But I mean, following industry awards, this one picked up all the Sound Guild awards. CAS and NPSC both gave it the nod. And the reason why, I think, is because it uses a technique similar to what I was talking about last week of amplification. I think the sound design in this movie is incredibly unrealistic in that it's not just a representation of what is going on in the scene. It's like a zoomed in pinpoint of the most important sounds that we need to hear. And we zoom in. There's this one moment where we're out on the battlefield and it cuts to going back into the general's office. And the way that we cut is we hear the sound of his crunch on the croissant, but they play the crunch like slightly before the visual cut actually happens. And it's so close, and yet the shot is like a medium or whatever. It's like we're not like an insert.
A J cut or an L cut.
It's a J cut.
It's J.
Because,
okay, all right.
Because the audio track is below, and the J goes like this. That's how I remember it.
Yes,
there you go.
And so I think that this film uses sound design to do storytelling, like the first time we go and investigate and we steal the goose. Paul stands outside that wall, and we just look at him listening while he listens to hear what's going on inside. And the way that when they're stealing food from the French bunker and they hear the tank come outside, the film like gives us little crumbs of what's going to happen next, almost entirely through the sound design. And that like leads, if you're really listening, I think you can pick up on a lot of elements and a lot of story beats that are going to happen in the film before they actually happen, which makes you feel pretty smart. And then the actual construction and all the sound effects that are used, I mean, they're just like, it's impeccable. This thing sounds, it's so immersive sounding when there's the explosions and the war. It's like totally overwhelming. And then when there's quieter moments, we hear all these like, the subtleties of what's going on in the scene. Like when they're outside the goose house is what I'm going to call it.
The goose house.
The goose house. We can hear the sound of the snowflakes falling around them. And I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I've been in a situation like that. And that is the sound that you hear because it's so quiet and all you can hear. But like, in what movie have they decided to like amplify what we experience hearing in a way that we can understand it in the film? I think stuff like that is this is the direction that films should be taking with sound design, in my opinion.
Yeah.
May I just momentarily lament that we talk about the fantastic cinematography, the fantastic sound and sound design and sound editing. May I just lament the fact that this is a Netflix original?
Yeah.
Or a Netflix distributed film, not a Netflix original. Because
I think Netflix might have put up a lot of money for the production, though. They might have funded a lot of it at the beginning.
I think they did. Yeah.
Will I get my Blu-ray? That's my question, Tanner.
I don't know, but our local theater chain is doing a Best Picture showcase, so there is an opportunity to see this in a theater if we so wish. But imagine if this got picked up by like a major studio here in the U.S. and
Yeah.
got a wide release. I think this would be bigger than it is, because it's great that people get to set eyes on it on Netflix, but it just your home theater setup. Home
Unless
theater,
you're
if
me.
you can call it that. Exactly.
Unless you're me, it's not going to be good enough.
It's not going to do it justice. And I was
I
it was
had
great
mine
in the
cranked
moment.
up so goddamn loud.
Yeah.
Oh, it was beautiful.
It was great in the moment, but I couldn't help feeling like, damn, I wish I was watching this in a theater.
Yeah.
Can I just talk about something completely separate, just as because I feel like we're wrapping up
Go
and I want
for
to
it.
talk about it.
Time
Yeah.
for something completely different.
I want to talk about. First of all, I just want to say it's the image of a grown man carrying a full-grown goose under his arm running across a field is very funny to me. I just want
the
to throw that
goose's
out
neck
there.
is broken and it's like flapping all around.
It's funny, but the thing I actually wanted to say is I think Kat's death is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it is, and it kind of speaks to me to how the film is pretty straightforward thematically, but it really does everything it can to sort of expose its ideas and develop them. I think the notion that a young boy with a gun bigger than himself goes and kills a man on behalf of a grievance that his father holds is really interesting.
At
And I think
on the
it's,
last day of the war.
yeah, I think it's a really great sort of analog for this idea of nationalism provoking
Yeah.
these young men to war,
Mm.
but for a battle that is not really worth what's going to happen. I mean, they stole a couple eggs,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but so on behalf of my father or my fatherland, I'm going to go and lose my innocence, killing another man for basically no reason.
Yeah,
I just-
it didn't
I
even
think it's
kill
incredibly
his
effective.
dad. It's just the embarrassment, of
Yeah.
like continually stealing from us, and my father can't kill you or seek revenge on you, so I will.
Yeah, I think it's and it's told very subtly. There's like this brooding shot, like a medium close of the kid, like sitting next to his dad. And I think his dad, you don't even see the dad's face. You see like his waist and below because he's short.
Mhm.
And we just hear we see him with the gun to Kat, and we hear the shot, and that's all we get. But I think it's such a spare but effective criticism of the nationalism that took these boys to war. So I just want
Yeah.
to shout that out.
This
Mhm.
is what film analysis does to an MF. It
Truly.
gives them the ability to read this out of that scene, which I think is absolutely probably the intention.
Yeah.
Like, that takes layers of like learning what film can do to extrapolate.
And what
So I
a
like this
what a
movie.
comparison.
Best.
Yes, to the general. Just throwing that, like, we have the general who's father, and then
Mhm.
the boy who's father, and we're on different
thought you were talking about
sides
the
and
Buster
different
Keaton movie.
statures.
Not
you
the
know.
Buster Keaton movie.
Mm-mm.
I'm
went-
gonna do my classic Tanner Dykstra. Hey, what about this cool thing I wrote down? And just
Perfect.
analyze
And,
some
and
of
while
these, yeah.
Tanner does that,
Or we can go
get
into-
your
yeah.
ranking pulled up. Let's figure out where this film goes on the list.
I love the moment where Paul gets his uniform from Heinrich or whatever, or it was Heinrich's, and the guy just says like, "Oh, it must have been too small." Happens all the time when we very clearly saw Heinrich get fucking slaughtered on the battlefield.
Mhm.
And rips off the tag and drops it onto the pile of
Yep.
many other ones. Great moment.
Yeah. Another great moment after the first like full barrage that the troop experiences. I think it's Kat. He turns to him and says, "They're coming." Great line reading.
Oh my God,
just
terrifying.
a fantastic moment there.
Mhm.
What else? I think that might be it actually.
One moment that sticks out to me is when they're walking through the forest and you see that really, 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 really tall tree and a half a person's body hanging off of one branch, sticking off a incredibly stinking tall tree.
Yep.
Crazy shot.
Yep.
They don't linger on it either. It's just like up there, you see it and you're like, did I see that right? And then the camera pounds down. I believe there's another shot of it like from the top or something like that.
Mhm.
But that is a prop, that is a prosthetic, that is the cinematography. It's the gigantic tree that they either found or built, and like everything about that makes it a really impactful but quick but impactful moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think this film lives in those small moments where you're just like, what did I like? Oh my God, I can't believe I just watched that. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's where this film really gets you.
A
Yep.
quick question. I meant to ask this at the top. Did we all watch with English subtitles and German?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Is
good.
there a dub?
Good.
Because
There is.
Netflix auto plays the English dub.
Weird.
It did for us at least.
Yeah.
Huh.
Classic
Listen to it
Netflix-
like, hold on.
Yeah.
Well,
It did
Yeah.
the same thing with Squid Games or whatever. Classic Netflix would always
Classic.
be doing that.
yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't watch it with subtitles. I just understood everything they said.
Oh, sure. Gotcha.
No, you didn't.
No, I
you
didn't.
didn't. You liar.
Okay, let's see where this film goes. Someone, Tanner, do you know what it is? Do you know what the number is?
Let's find it out. 3, 2, 1. Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, boop, boop. Oh my God, Tucker and I have the same score. Look
Oh
at
my
that.
God!
shit.
Oh, deliberation.
Oh no.
We have given
No.
this film a 9.2. The same score as Everything Everywhere All at Once. Well, the point breakdown, Tucker and Tanner both gave it an 8.8. I gave it a 9.3, and Abram gave it a 9.8. So, I mean, we can expand the rounding or we can debate.
I
Let's
think it's an
debate.
easy debate. There's only two. Yeah, there's only two movies. Why would we not debate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
Here's the
when
thing,
have we
there's-
ever expanded the rounding?
There's a very clear delineation on who thinks it's better than Everything Everywhere and who thinks it's not.
Yeah, there's
But-
two, well, yeah.
Should we all go around the horn and give ourselves give a quick little 1 or 2 sentence argument as to why we think one way or the other?
Yeah,
I
right,
like
let's
that.
go around
I
the
like
horn.
Okay.
Where's the horn starting, Tanner?
I don't
With
want to
10.
start. Tucker, you start.
Okay.
I want to start.
Go
I'm
Abram. Go
starting.
Abram.
To me, everything. No, fuck. All Quiet on the Western Front exemplifies what film and its unique affordances can do. I think that as an audio visual experience, this is a remarkable achievement in not necessarily the sort of stylized use of film that Everything Everywhere is, but a very precise and beautiful and technically perfect exploration of a visual motif and sound used to convey emotion. And to me, ultimately, that's what it is. There is imagery from this film that I will never forget, and it is not only the disgusting things that speak to theme most clearly, but also just beautiful images of the world that has been destroyed because of that violence, as Tucker was talking about before.
Yeah.
So as a raw illustration of film, I think that Everything Everywhere All at Once is not as good as All Quiet on the Western Front. To
There
save
you
it
go.
at the last second.
There you go.
Two very long names for
Yes.
two pretty much equally length films, actually.
Yeah, actually. Yeah.
I want to go last.
I was smiling when you said that, Abram, because I absolutely agree. That is why this film is as remarkable as it is. My score went up quite a bit as we watched this. I went to my letterbox. I raised it up to a 9 instead of an 8. I think this is a phenomenal film. And these two movies back to back is a great start for this Best Picture run. And honestly, I think it kind of continues. I think they're all great.
Really?
Now that we've seen them all, Tanner and I, this was the last one we had to watch. But I think that Everything Everywhere All at Once is what you just mentioned, but for me, much stronger directorially, creatively, thematically. It touches on ideas and concepts we don't see brought to the big screen, with ideas and editing choices and visual motifs that are much more subtle, I think, than a war movie, which needs to be bombastic, which needs to carry across these themes that we have been exploring for over a decade at this point. War movies have been around since the beginning of cinema, but
certainly over a decade.
well, plus some. Everything Everywhere All at Once does something that I've never seen film do before, and that's why I think it stands as the test of what film can do now. What films, as you said, affordances and the stylized nature of film can be used to create synergies between the editing and the sound design and the acting and the set design that are so impeccably done and fresh in Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I think even though they're both great films, Everything Everywhere All at Once stands above All Quiet on the Western Front because it feels new. I feel like I hadn't seen so many choices they made in that movie when I've seen 2,500 plus movies in my life. I'd seen a lot of what this film had done before, maybe not to as consistent a bar as this film did across the board, but I could draw the exact same themes from the 1930s version. And again, they were pretty comparable in my mind when I started this, even though it doesn't have the technical fidelity of this. I can draw the parallels to Saving Private Ryan or 1917. Also movies I think are 9 out of 10, some of my favorite movies of all time. but I can't draw those same parallels with Everything Everywhere All at Once, except for maybe Swiss Army Man, because that's from the same, creative minds. But distinctness absolutely rules over technical fidelity, even though Everything Everywhere All at Once also has that technical fidelity, just in a different way.
Tucker,
That's compelling.
Tanner,
Abram.
you have holding your thinking helper. That pen there is helping you come to a conclusion.
Yes. Tucker and Abram are you both make very compelling arguments. You're two smart fellas. You're not fart smellers over here. And I even though my score is higher for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I agree so much with Tucker's arguments about how it's so distinct, so unique, so fresh, so modern. Well, this is a adaptation that
So
I've
old
seen
and stank
two-
and rank and
that I've seen 2 times in the past already. The technical proficiency that Abram was talking about, the masterful usage of the affordances, we're all going to use that word here by the end of the day, that are allotted to film, the proficiency with which they are used in Everything Everywhere. All Quiet on the Western Front are so apparent, and even as we talked about it, we were peeling back layers of theme and meaning and how
just
they
like we did
do.
Everything Everywhere.
Yeah, how exactly, and how much
Trying
they
to change
did,
his mind.
how much the screenplay can do with so little. But of course, we did the same thing with Everything Everywhere All at Once. So, if I have to come down to it, I'm gonna go Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm gonna stick by my score, but I could so easily be swayed over to All Quiet on the Western Front, so easily. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see if we want to throw it to the audience. But Timo, please give your argument.
Oh man.
Well,
I
if
want
you
to
make the
throw it
split
to the
decision-
audience. Okay, here's my deal. I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is where I want movies to go. I think that is moving in a direction that like uses modern sensibilities and internet humor and ways that we are modern in this film. But All Quiet on the Western Front feels topical also. For the first time in a long time, war has returned to Europe. There is a real live war going on between European countries right now. And while this film was made before that, I don't know what you said and I'm going to ignore it. Before this film was made before that war began, I think it coming out now has special meaning. And so I haven't felt the way that I felt when watching this movie in a long time. And the only, it's only happened a few other times. Just the extreme negative emotions that this movie gave me, which I am going to choose to view as this movie's success. I was talking to my parents on the phone and I was like, you guys should not watch this movie. I was like, it's really good, but I don't think you will enjoy it at all. I think my parents would not be able to handle it. So that it makes me want to be like, All Quiet just feels like, it made me feel a lot more, even though the themes and like the position of Everything Everywhere is maybe a little bit more important in like film canon if I were try to future project like what's gonna happen.
Yeah, probably.
I'm really torn.
It's a masterful example of modern film in the realm of film that we know before versus a like radical new way forward for film that hasn't proven itself yet.
If I can say one more thing to that point, I think we're thinking about modernity in the sense of like subject matter, when I think it's also important to think about it through the lens of this being, to Tanner's point earlier, such a spare script that is on a dialogue level being so rich in terms of opportunity for direction and camera and sound to synchronize together. I think that there's like an airtight relationship between every element of this film. And to me, there's something very modern about that with its level of fidelity. Of course, fidelity changes, but just as fidelity ages, I think so will the humor of Everything Everywhere, even though it feels germane to the moment. I think that the level of filmmaking in All Quiet is also very
the
germane to the
screenplay
moment.
of Everything Everywhere, in juxtaposition of All Quiet is bountiful in not only dialogue but especially concept. It's full of concept, it's full of ideas, it's full of galaxy brained, multiversal brained ideas and stuff like that. and whereas All Quiet on the Western Front is just so good at doing what it does with some characters. They are at war.
Mm-hmm. You know
A lot
what?
of fun.
You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. It's coming down to this. I like the sound better in All Quiet on the Western Front.
Okay, so we got a 50-50 split. As I said, I could go All Quiet on the Western Front, but I feel it's more fun to leave it to the audience.
I'm just gonna say this, and I don't
Okay.
want to pull the curtain back this far. but
Okay.
we are almost definitely recording the next one of these before this video goes live.
Yes.
Do we want the hassle of multiple Quest episodes domino affecting the ranking being uncertain as we wait for audience?
I don't think we can afford our Quest affordances will not let that happen.
Abram
Yeah.
is playing on my need for cleanliness and order. It's unfair.
And that means Timo can change his answer.
and that means
Tanner is closer to moving.
That's true. I am.
But no. Here's what I would say is to put the
Okay.
final line of defense on Everything Ever All at Once. Is I do
Okay.
think that in terms of what All Quiet on the Western Front did, in terms of amazing sound design and using a sparse script, these are things that I feel could have been done 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I think they were done very well in 1917. I thought they were done very well in 2009 with the Hurt Locker. These ideas and concepts again have been done before, and in my mind, in some cases, done better, sometimes done worse. But I do think what Everything Everywhere All at Once does in terms of reinventing filmmaking, yes, from having new concepts and jokes that might feel germane to the moment, but using filmmaking in a way that has not been seen before, that is not only idea but execution that takes film to the next level. This evolves what we've already had, but what Everything Ever All at Once does is put the past behind us and say, no, this is a bold step forward into the future, and it's okay to try things and not completely work. It's okay to try things that are radically different from what we've seen before and may take some getting used to, but it is that bold step into the future that I think that we should recognize, that I recognize, that I think the Oscars should recognize as holding up to the future. Everything Ever All at Once will be the more important movie 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It will be influencing more films. And All Quiet on the Western Front will be influencing war films. I absolutely think this is the gold standard for 2022 war films. Not that there's much competition, but that, I think, to me, very easily puts it on the side of Everything Ever All at Once, because the future needs to be changed by someone with a even bolder creative vision than someone could have thought of 5 years ago. And I really think that's what it stands as.
Here's what I'm gonna say, because I think we should just make a decision.
Yeah.
And Tanner and I keep bearing in mind the logistical challenge we'd face. Here's what I'm gonna say. Tanner and I were both writers. We're both about to lose our careers to ChatGPT. So I think,
of course.
yes. So I think that if we land at a split decision, we let the computer decide and we extend out that decimal point.
Okay. Let's do
Well,
it.
Tucker's gonna like
Only if
it.
we have a split decision.
Um,
Only if there's a split decision, because I would prefer that the human
I was
touch.
talking about it. I was thinking about it. Like, could I put All Quiet? I could. We talked about it so much, and I talked about how I love this film so much. But at a gut level, it just feels wrong to put it above Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, I could do it, but I would feel guilty about it.
Okay.
I would feel.
all right.
You'd harbor
Well,
it for the rest of your days.
We're a zero guilt channel, so let's extend our rounding.
Okay, let's do it.
Well, so going beyond 1 decimal place into 2 decimal points, we get Everything Everywhere with a 9.23 and All Quiet with a 9.18.
Oh,
So-
there it is.
So
There
Shows the
everything.
range that can round to 9.2.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Such a vast gulf in how the quality of the...
So it would
Oh,
seem
man.
that our
God.
scores
I love
give
engaging in a little trolling.
our scores give Everything Everywhere All at Once the number 1 spot, but followed extremely close behind by
Inch the
All
inch.
Quiet on the
Shit.
Western Front. Mere
And-
inches, by the mere space that the lines moved in World War I. That
There
is
you
how
go.
far
Wow.
apart these movies are.
Hundreds of meters.
Dear viewer, and I just want to say that, ultimately, while it seems like that discussion was for naught, and we just let the computer decide at the end of the day, I do love the conversation that we had. comparing these two films and what they mean
That's what the show is for.
For 2022 in film.
Mm-hmm. If you have an opinion about either of these two films, especially these two films versus each other, throw them down there in the comments, because if these films are so tight, they might just stay next to each other for the rest of the list, and we could come back and revise with some viewer input a month down the road.
Oh, what if all these films get a 9.2?
We're doing Avatar. That's not getting a 9.2.
Okay, all right.
It's gonna get a 9.5. Abram, you spilled the beans. You spilled the beans on what
That's
movie
true.
we're gonna talk about next week. Give it to us straight this time.
We are doing Avatar: The Way of Water.
Ah, yes.
That's as straight as you can
Avatar.
be.
The way of water is in all things. It connects us. It moves us. Other things.
Next is before our birth and after our death.
death. There you go.
Yes.
Payakan, Jake
Yeah.
Sully, Natiri,
Loak.
Loak,
Quartet.
Nateum. Mm-hmm.
We got lots
The
of
world
lovely.
of Pandora awaits
We're
you,
going to
dear
Pandora, baby. We're gonna do some war in Pandora. we don't think about All Quiet on the Western Front while you watch Avatar. Don't do it, because I don't think those two movies mesh particularly well.
As for the availability of this one, I'm gonna take it from James Cameron. Go to a theater. That's how you gotta see it.
I got my ticket. I'm going to the theater to watch this one again.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it on a $1,750 ticket in the middle of the day in an IMAX theater in fucking Providence, Rhode Island, and that theater was almost half full. And
Yeah.
the movie
God.
came out
We need to talk about
6
that.
weeks
months
ago.
We will be talking about the pervasiveness of Avatar, of
Christ.
Pandora fever
Yeah.
in the populace.
It's number 4 now, isn't it?
Number
as of
4
today?
passed
Christ.
just today passed The Force Awakens.
horse
Could-
shit.
By the time this episode comes out, could be number 3, could be number 2. Who's to say?
Who knows? James Cameron, he seems to have done it again, but will he get what he couldn't get last time he made an Avatar movie, which was the best picture? I mean, he didn't get the nom last time, right?
He did. Yeah.
Okay.
It got
Get the nom,
nominated.
didn't get the pick.
Will he be able to get the win with this film? We're going to tell you next time on the quest for the bestest. I think my ending message means a little more this time around. We will see you all next time. And remember this, after this movie especially, peace.
I
Yeah,
see what
yep.
you did there.
Yep.
I-
yep.
I would go. Hey guys, we'll see you next time. War.
War. That's how I'll end it next.